Hi, it's Peter from Teach Me Maths. Welcome to another video to help you to pass the QTS Numeracy skills test. This video today is just basic long multiplication. So really it's not very QTS specific, but I am going to talk about a couple of different ways to do long multiplication, and I'm going to suggest what I think is the best way to do it for QTS. And the reason for that, as most of you know, is that you've only got 18 seconds to answer the mental arithmetic questions. Okay, so we need to maybe adjust our approach. Okay, so maybe some of the methods that some of you used in school and some of you currently use, you might want to think about changing, and I'm going to cover that in this video. Okay, so let's just talk about general multiplication and how we do it. Okay, so now obviously this question is not long multiplication. Okay, this is just times table knowledge. I haven't used any method at all there. I just know my times tables. Okay, and this is why times tables are so important. There isn't a method for doing 7 times 4. The only possible other way that you could do that would be to actually add 4 7s together or 7 4s. Okay, so you would sort of end up kind of, you know, writing this kind of thing out and counting in 7s. Okay, and even worse than that, you know, look at this, look how bad this is, because look, you're sort of writing a 4 out 7 times. Okay, now most people would kind of maybe do that on their fingers and go 4, 8, 12, 16, 20, 24, 28. It takes too long. Okay, this is why your times tables are so important. Okay, now let me talk about maybe some times tables that aren't so important. Okay, I do hear lots of people say, oh, make sure you know your 12 times tables. I'm going to kind of show you here that you don't really need to. It's nice to know them, but it's not important, because what I wanted to show you here is that, you know, 12 is just an example of a 2-digit number. Okay, no different than 89. Okay, now most people aren't going to know their 89 times tables. Okay, so there isn't really too much pressure to know your 12 times tables, because we're going to use an actual long multiplication method for doing 7 times 12. Okay, and I'm going to write 2 different methods down for doing it, and I'm going to show you which one I think is the best. Well, I'll tell you straight away, this is the best method. Okay, and I'm saying that in the context of QTS because you've got time pressure. Okay, this is the quickest way to do it. So now, any long multiplication method still basically breaks everything down into times tables. So what we're doing here is we're looking at this first. We're doing 7 times 2. Okay, the only difference is we don't just write 14. We write the units of the number 14 and we carry the 10 over into another column. Now where you put that little carryover doesn't really matter. So I see some people write it up here, okay, or over here. Okay, it doesn't really matter as long as you don't forget it. Okay, because the next step, let's just use another colour, the next step would be to move along to here and to do 7 times 1, but then you must add the carryover on. So 7 times 1 is 7, and you add the carryover and you write an 8, and 84 is your correct answer. Okay, now we're going to extend that method a little bit more in a minute for slightly harder questions, but let's talk about an alternative method. Okay, the grid method. I like the grid method. I kind of, you know, lots of my GCSE students use it. My daughter used it, and as long as she was getting the questions right, I was pretty happy. Okay, so let's have a look at the grid method. Okay, so the grid method, we're going to do multiplication, and what you do is you split the 2-digit number up into its tens units. Well, sorry, its tens and its units separately. Okay, if it was a 3-digit number, you separate the hundreds, the tens and the units. Okay, and then you individually multiply those by the 7. Okay, so 7 tens is 70, 7 twos is 14, and then you have to add those two together. Now, if you can add those two together in your head, great, it's a relatively quick method. Okay, but as the questions get more difficult, and we'd maybe move on to a 2-digit times a 2-digit, can't say it, a 2-digit times a 2-digit number, okay, it becomes longer and longer and longer. Okay, so I would recommend this sort of more old-fashioned kind of long multiplication method. Okay, it may require you to practice it, but that's the point really, is learn it, okay, and then practice it. Very easy to make up your own questions, and you can check your answers on a calculator. Okay, so let's move on and do something a little bit harder. Okay, so just scroll this screen up. Okay, now thankfully you don't have to do too much 2-digit times 2-digit multiplication in QTS, but you do need to know how to do it, and there are certain circumstances where it's pretty useful. Okay, so I'm just going to fairly randomly pick a couple of 2-digit numbers. Okay, and you can do the same. You can pick a couple of random ones. Okay, and you can just practice writing it out, and you can check your answer on a calculator. Now it doesn't matter whether I write it like that or write it like that. It doesn't matter whether you put the 17 at the top or the bottom. Okay, really doesn't matter. Okay, so don't hesitate in the exam wondering which way round to put it. Just put it any way round you like. Now then, I have to be a little bit careful how I teach this now, okay, because it's slightly more complicated. Okay, we're basically going to ignore that 1 that I've just kind of crossed out in red. So you really treat the beginning of the question as 3 times 17, and we do exactly what we just did with the previous question. Okay, and hopefully you guys can see how I got 51. 3 17s are 51. Okay, now very, very important, and this is one of the common mistakes with this method. Okay, we are now going to use the 1 that I crossed out here. Okay, so let me just put it back in. Sorry, still getting used to this new whiteboard. Okay, so really we're crossing this one out now. Okay, now the thing is that 1, let's circle it, that 1 isn't really a 1. Okay, it's a 10. Okay, because it's part of the number 13, so the digit is although the digit is a 1, it's actually representing a 10. So what we must do, and this hopefully as you practice becomes a really good habit, you just put a 0 here. And the reason for that is that any number, if you're timesing a number by 10, it's the same as timesing it by 1 and then putting a 0 on the end. So what we do is we're just going backwards. We put the 0 in at the beginning, and that means that we can treat it as a 1. So we do 1 times 17. Now obviously look, I've picked fairly easy numbers here. Okay, I've put a calculation with lots of 1s in it. Okay, we'll do something a little bit harder in a minute. Okay, the main point of this, I wanted to keep the numbers simple so that you can get used to why we put this red 1 in there. Obviously you don't have to do it in red, but that, sorry, I think I said 1 then, the red 0. Okay, now once you get that, you just add the 51 and the 170 together. Okay, I'm not really going to sort of go into that in detail. You should be alright with your column method for adding stuff. Okay, notice that I didn't use this carryover, this 2 here. I have seen students, particularly some of my younger students, when they're doing this, they get themselves muddled up. They either miss out a carryover or they actually add the carryover in when we're doing this. We use the carryover earlier on, and you have to try and ignore it. The way I do it is I tend to write the carryovers smaller than my main numbers, so that when my eyes look at this, I just look at the 5 and the 7 because they're bigger. Okay, so try and find little ways like that to avoid those common mistakes. Okay, right, let's move on to something slightly more difficult, but basically the same. So let's go for 58 times 23. Okay, now these are good to practice, but realistically I'll be pretty surprised if you got 58 times 23 in your QTS. Okay, but it's the practice that you do beforehand that will mean that you're comfortable no matter what numbers they throw at you. Okay, so we go ahead again, we use the 3 first. 3 8s are 24. Okay, and 3 5s are 15. Add the carryover, we get this. You could even do a quick cross out of the carryover. Now put that 0 in, don't even think about it, you just have to practice this, so you just do it without thinking. You put the 0 there. Then now we use the 2, so 2 8s are 16. Okay, 2 5s are 10. Add the carryover. Okay, and then add the numbers together. Okay, like I say, I'm not really going to go into this in detail, but again, it's part of the practice, isn't it? You're doing a multiplication, but you do have to add some numbers together at the end. Okay, and like I say, you guys practice this. If you don't get 1,334 on your or rather, if you put it in your calculator and you haven't got 1,334, go back and have a look and see if you can spot where you've gone wrong. If you get an answer much smaller than that, you've probably missed this 0 out. Okay, that's the most common mistake. Now, if I was doing a long multiplication video aimed at GCSE students or just in general, I might go further and do 3-digit times 2-digit, a 3-digit times a 3-digit. I can't say that word. Okay, I'm not going to go any further with this because this is aimed at the QTS Numeracy skills test. This is what you need to do. Okay, now what you might also need to be able to do is to do 5.8 times 2.3. okay, and so decimal multiplication, you take the decimal points out and you would get this number here, and then you have to learn how to adjust for the decimal. Okay, I'll do a separate video for decimal multiplication. Okay, so there you go, there's your method. Okay, this is the one that I would like you to use. Okay, I will just do this question with grid method just to show you, because there might be one or two of you watching and going, oh no, I still prefer the grid method. Okay, if we do 58 times 23 with a grid method, okay, it's a perfectly good method, but it's too slow. Okay, so you split the 58 into its tens and its units, you split the 23 into its tens and its units. Okay, and we've got 4 multiplications to do. Okay, that in itself isn't too much of a problem. Okay, the most common mistake with this, by the way, is to not get the correct number of zeros. So things like 20 times 50. Okay, you've got to get the right amount of zeros in there. Now what I think is a little bit slow about the grid method though is now I've got 4 numbers to add together. I need to add the 1000 and the 160. We could do that in one go. So that's these 2 done. And then maybe add these 2. And you see that they're the same numbers as, let me just go back up here. Can you see that they're the same numbers that we had here? Okay, and then you would add those together. Okay, I think it's quicker doing it the other way. Does require a little bit of practice, but I think it's worth persevering with. Okay, you must get your long multiplication down. It's a good way to practice your times tables as well. Let me just do one more little bit just to illustrate what I mean by that. If you continually pick things like 24 times 12, okay, you've got quite small digits in that question. Okay, 2s and 4s and 1s. It's easy peasy. Okay, if you want to sort of stretch yourself and practice your times tables, if you know you don't like your 8s and your 9s and your 6s and your 7s, then practice this kind of question. Okay, it will get you doing your 7s and your 8s. Okay, it's a tricky one and it's not the sort of thing that you will get in QTS, but if you put the practice in beforehand, then no matter what they throw at you, you'll be comfortable with. So maybe have a go at this one and see what answer you get and check it on your calculator. Okay,